Hello everyone, my name is David McMurdo and welcome to my channel where I reveal the spiritual in everything. Subscribe because I upload a new video every single weekday. I host a public live stream every single Saturday, and then I host another live stream on the Sunday for my Patreon supporters. You can support me on Patreon for £5 or more a month, for which you will gain access to my exclusive Patreon blog, which includes the aforementioned Patreon live streams, and for which you will also receive a copy of my book, Experiential Spirituality, The Mystic Answer to Everything, in PDF format, and this book is also available in Kindle and paperback format through a link in the description box below. Now today I want to speak about the spiritual significance of mountains, because what you find is that around the world throughout history, people attribute special significance to either mountains generally or to very specific mountains. And we can even see this within the major Abrahamic religions. For example, Moses, of course, is said to have communed with God and even received the 10 Commandments atop a mountain. If we look to the Christian tradition, we see that Yeshua, Jesus Christ, he delivered his most famous sermon atop a mountain, and he later underwent his transfiguration atop a mountain. Likewise, if we look to the Islamic tradition, we find that the Prophet Muhammad is said to have communed with the angel Gabriel or Jabril atop a mountain, specifically within a mountain cave. And yet it's not just the major religions of the world that attribute this special significance to mountains. We find the same phenomenon even among local peoples, even within local folklore. So for example, over in California, there's a mountain called Mount Shasta, and the Native Americans that once lived in that area told of how an entity that they described as the spirit from above, that went by the name of Scale, descended upon Mount Shasta. Now, there was another entity that they knew as the spirit from below by the name of Lau, and Scale destroyed Lau with fiery rocks, according to those Native Americans. And Mount Shasta continues to hold special significance to certain individuals even up to the present day. Within the New Age community, many individuals associate Mount Shasta with UFO activity, and in more obscure areas, there are some who claim that there is actually a hidden city within the mountain itself, a city that is inhabited by nothing less than the descendants of the survivors of Lemuria. Lemuria is said to have been a lost continent. It's very comparable to Atlantis, and it's generally held to have once existed within the Indian Ocean. And the idea of Lemuria was most famously popularized by the late 19th century occultist and theosophist Madame Helena Blavatsky. So how are we to understand this significance that is attributed to mountains? I think there are two primary approaches you can take, one that is grounded and one that is not so grounded. So if you're taking the more grounded approach, you might simply say that the reason that peoples around the world throughout history have attributed such special significance to mountains or to specific mountains is simply due to the way that ancient peoples understood the world around them. You see, ancient peoples recognized that, of course, the sun came from the sky, the rain came from the sky, and therefore they would quite naturally associate the sky with positive forces because they recognized that those life-giving elements come from the sky. Therefore, the sky was the home of their good or divine forces, however they might have conceived of them. Conversely, our ancestors have always had every reason to fear the darkness, and the more primitive the ancestor, the more reason they had to fear that darkness. Underground places are naturally dark. Besides that, if you were an ancient person and you lived in an area that underwent a lot of seismic activity, you may have seen the earth split open, you may have gazed into that abyss, you may even have seen lava spew forth from the earth. And indeed, if we recall that Native American legend concerning Mount Shasta, of how Scale destroyed Lau with fiery rocks, that is very evocative of volcanic activity. Perhaps it is simply an ancestral memory of volcanic activity, and there are actually several stories concerning Yahweh throughout the Old Testament that likewise are very evocative of volcanic activity. And so one might say that the reason that mountains are given such special significance, or specific mountains are given such special significance, is that to the ancient world, to ancient peoples, to be atop a mountain was to be as close as one could get to the divine forces, to the good forces, as one could be while still in this world. Conversely, if you were underground in the darkness, it wasn't just that you were further from those positive divine forces, it's that you were in some manner of hell, you were in some manner of underworld, in the darkness, within which lurked all manner of dangers. Now, then there is the less grounded approach, because if you do take such legends or such folklore or such mythology literally, you might posit that mountains do indeed have a special spiritual power, that they are indeed the home to special spiritual forces. I've always said on this channel, and it's something I must emphasize again, even more in the future, that you've always got to be honest about what you know and what you don't know. You shouldn't pretend to have certainty where you don't actually have certainty. And naturally, I always try to practice what I preach. And so I've got to be honest with you and say that I can't give you a definitive conclusion on this subject. But I am, of course, all about experiential spirituality. And so what I can do is testify of my own experience concerning mountains and the spiritual forces that may or may not exist upon them. First of all, I've always enjoyed mountain climbing. I've always enjoyed free climbing. I will often free climb the cliffs in my local area. It's something of a contradiction within my character in that I really love climbing, especially free climbing, but I also really don't like heights, and yet here I am compelled to climb all of these high places. Now, as most of you will know, I was born and still live in the Highlands of Scotland, but there is the Highlands of Scotland geologically, and then there are the Highlands of Scotland regionally. So I live in the northeast, the far northeast of the Highlands of Scotland, so it's the Highlands of Scotland regionally, but it's not the Highlands of Scotland geologically because it's on the coast. However, I have left and returned to the Highlands of Scotland geologically, in other words, in terms of physical height and elevation, many different times throughout my life. And I can tell you that even as a child, I knew when I was back in the Highlands, having been away for some time, I felt it within me. Let's say I was on a train journey, and so I had no idea where exactly I was on that journey. I could feel when I had left the Highlands, geologically speaking, and when I had returned to the Highlands, geologically speaking. And I cannot explain why. You might argue that it has something to do with the fact that, of course, at higher elevations there is less oxygen. And if we're to return to our more grounded understanding of the spiritual significance of mountains, you might even say that perhaps at certain elevations, the lack of oxygen does something to a human being that in some way helps to induce what that person might later describe as a transcendent experience. I don't have any answers, any solid answers to give you on that count. I can simply say that I know exactly when I've left the Highlands, and I know exactly when I've returned there. I feel it inside of me. Now, I mentioned Mount Shasta over in California earlier. There is a very comparable mountain here in the Highlands of Scotland by the name of Ben McDouie, and it's a mountain that I have a very profound connection with, and yet a connection that I just do not fully understand. Ben McDouie is the second highest mountain in the United Kingdom, but it's most famous because it's said to be haunted by an entity that is called in Scottish Gaelic Amferlaith Mór, which translates to English as the Big Grey Man. There are many testimonies from individuals who have encountered this entity in different ways. Some have simply said that they felt a presence atop the mountain, and they felt an overwhelming sense of dread, and they felt compelled to flee from the mountain, which of course could be highly dangerous, since again we're talking about the second highest mountain in the United Kingdom, an infamously treacherous mountain. Then there are those who claim to have heard footsteps walking behind them, and then there are those who claim to have seen a vague humanoid figure that seemed to shift in the distance. And one thing that's worth pointing out is that Many of these testimonies are coming from experienced mountain climbers. These are not individuals that would mistake natural phenomenon like Brocken spectres or mere echoes as being anything else. Now, I personally have always felt a profound connection, not just with Ben McDooey, but with the Amphere Lythmore itself, with the big grey man itself. I feel compelled to go to Ben McDooey, and many of you will know that I intended to do that very thing this year. It's just that with my recent change in circumstances, I don't think that's going to be possible any longer, but I still fully intend to visit Ben McDooey, and I still fully intend to spend the night alone at the top of the mountain in order to confront whatever this thing might be. Now, that is only possible in summer because I would certainly freeze to death in winter, and it's going to be highly dangerous even in summer, but it's something I just feel really compelled to do. I have this voice inside me, not inside my head, but here, that draws me to that mountain to attempt to discover this entity, to confront this entity, and yet there is another voice inside me, and I honestly cannot tell you if it's the same voice or a different voice, that tells me that I will certainly die there. I don't know if that voice or these voices are my intuition, or if there's something else. For all I know, they could be the Amphere Lythmore itself. I don't know. I just feel irresistibly drawn to that mountain. I feel I've got a destiny to do this, and yet I also feel that I will at some point die on that mountain. But when I consider the matter, it doesn't trouble me too much. We all have to die someday, and therefore we all have to die somewhere. And when I think about it, there's really nowhere I'd rather die than on the summit of Ben McDooey. And so all I can do is live my life and see where destiny takes me, and see to what end it takes me there. That's really all I have to say on this video. Do you have a sacred mountain or a mountain with some special significance in your area? Perhaps you'd like to share some of the local folklore concerning it, or perhaps you've got a comparable site in your local area. I'd really love to hear from you on that count, because I really enjoy hearing such stories, and maybe together we can try and understand this phenomenon more fully. But for now, thank you very much for watching, everyone. Subscribe, like the video, leave a comment, and I will see you tomorrow.